The main character had a terrible life filled with pain and failure. In the end, he was killed, but instead of it all ending there, a goddess gave him a second chance. The problem? She misunderstood him and turned him into a tree sapling. With every new branch he grew, he gained magical power. With every root that dug into the ground, he connected deeper with the world. He wasn't just part of nature anymore, he became the system that nature followed. Can a soul reborn as a tree change the meaning of life itself? That's the journey we're about to take. Somewhere far away, a father and his young son read together under the protective shade of the World Tree. Curious, the boy asked, "The World Tree? Where can we find it?" The father paused for a moment, thinking carefully before answering. He said there's a small village deep within the forest, where people from many different races live together. In that village, a spider dropped a ripe apple down to a dragon-like boy. Smiling brightly, the boy picked it up and thanked the spider, and then he thanked the World Tree before happily running off toward the village. Every person in that village greeted the World Tree daily, offering it their morning and afternoon blessings. The hero of our story is named Kotoba Sekai. He was a true shut-in, a hikikomori to the core. Society had no place for him, and honestly, he didn't care. He never went outside, barely acted like a person anymore. But today was different. He had no choice but to step out. The problem? He had completely forgotten how to leave his own house. And just outside, in the local shop nearby, something terrible was happening. A thief with a knife was threatening the shopkeeper. The thief shouted, demanding the money from the clerk. For the first time, the main character felt fear not for himself, but for someone else's life. Right in front of him, the shopkeeper was in serious danger. As he watched, something about the girl felt familiar. Wait, was she Kid Kasumi? They had gone to university together. He used to have quiet, unspoken feelings for her. He never expected to see her here, of all places. They had never really talked, and now she was staring at him like he was a stranger, maybe even a threat. He couldn't understand why she was working at a small store like this, but there wasn't time to figure it out. If he didn't act, she could die. Without thinking, Sekai charged at the robber, screaming. Startled, the thief turned and asked who he was. Then, in an instant, the knife sank into Sekai's chest. Die, the robber growled. Even through the pain, Sekai managed to tell Kid to run. As his vision blurred and his strength faded, he saw her escaping the store. A wave of peace washed over him. She was safe. That was all that mattered. His life, given for hers. That was enough. Thank goodness. Then, everything went dark. When Sekai opened his eyes again, he found himself in front of a stunning woman wearing a crown, her cape floating around her like she was weightless. A goddess. She looked at him with regret in her eyes and softly said she was sorry his life had ended this way. He saved the girl from the thief, but in doing so, he lost his own life. And yet, even if he hadn't stepped in, things might have ended the same way. That thought hit the main character hard. Had he died for nothing? The goddess, standing before him, gently responded. No, she said. You did the right thing. She looked truly sorry that things turned out this way. She told him that his actions were meaningful. He had been just a shut-in, someone forgotten by the world, yet in the end, he chose to protect another person over himself. That alone made his story beautiful. But Sekai couldn't help how he felt. Deep down, he believed his life had been a failure from start to finish. Nothing ever changed, and it was like he had never truly lived at all. The goddess noticed his sadness and apologized for bringing up painful memories. Then, she made an offer. She could give him another chance, a new life in a different world. But she needed his permission first. Would you like to start over? She asked. Sekai blinked. A second chance? Like in those Isekai anime? A new beginning in another world? His heart started racing. Yes, he shouted. Please. The goddess smiled and told him he could have one wish before he was reborn. She asked him to think carefully. Sekai remembered how he died stabbed by a knife. He didn't want to go through that again, so he made his wish. Give me a power that makes it impossible to die from something like that ever again. He wished to become the strongest in the world, not for fame, but so he could protect the people he cared about. That's all he really wanted. The goddess smiled warmly at his request. A soft magical light surrounded him, and glowing symbols appeared beneath his feet. She told him it was a beautiful wish. From now on, he would live in a new world, one as comforting as a mother's hug. He felt that warmth. It made him want to fall asleep. At that moment, his death and rebirth happened all at once. As he regained consciousness, he felt strange, like he was no longer human. What? What is this? He thought. What am I? He looked around, realizing he had become some sort of seedling, a tiny sprout. This wasn't what he had imagined when he asked for an unkillable body. And what kind of life was waiting for him now? Suddenly, a heavy boot crushed him. Pain shot through him. A large man walked past without even noticing. He muttered something about a boy named Aruto being annoying. People like you should be crawling in the dirt, the man scoffed. Aruto was a small, thin boy with a frightened look on his face. The man mocked him, saying that kids of farmers would always stay farmers, and that he would one day become the village chief no matter what. He and his gang laughed cruelly. Sekai, still recovering from being stepped on, muttered that the guy was a rude fool. The pain was real, even in this new form. As he struggled to move, he noticed that the boy, Aruto, was still standing nearby. Sekai braced himself, thinking the boy might step on him just like the other guy did. But instead, Aruto leaned down and looked at the little sprout with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "Did it hurt when that guy stepped on you?" He looked truly sorry and called the sprout a poor little thing. Then, Aruto did something unexpected. He picked up some sticks and placed them gently around the sprout like a tiny fence. "Now people will see you and won't step on you," he said with a smile. After that, he said goodbye and walked away. Sekai was touched. What a kind-hearted boy, he thought. He silently thanked Aruto and promised himself he'd never forget what he did. From deep within, he wished for Aruto's happiness. That pure, positive feeling took the form of a gentle glow and drifted toward the boy as he disappeared into the distance. Time passed. The sun was blazing high in the sky, and not a single drop of rain had fallen. Sekai was starting to dry out. He was so thirsty. If this heat kept up, he might not survive. He found himself hoping Aruto would come back and water him. Then, a tiny slime appeared nearby. It noticed the struggling sprout and, with a small splash, watered him. Sekai felt the cool moisture sink in and thought, what a kind little slime. But then he saw something troubling. The slime had gotten smaller. It had used part of its own body to help him. Even so, the slime made happy little sounds, and Sekai was filled with gratitude. Because of this slime, he could keep living. Sekai wished from his heart for the slime to have a wonderful life. He didn't even realize it, but those warm thoughts reached the slime, just like they had with Aruto. From then on, the slime returned every few days to water the sprout, becoming a quiet little guardian. The little slime must have been finding water somewhere, because every time it returned, it looked full and round again. Time kept moving forward, but the slime always came back, again and again. Each time it watered the sprout, it also shared a bit of its positive energy. Thanks to that, the sprout slowly started to grow. Meanwhile, in a small village near where the tree was starting to rise, a special day had arrived. Inside a tiny chapel, a group of children stood before a priest. He announced that today was an important moment in the village of Pakad, the coming-of-age ceremony. He explained that when children in the village turn 14, they take part in this ceremony and receive a skill, something gifted to them by the goddess herself. Some of these skills are powerful enough to help them become adventurers. Aruto stood among the children, quietly wondering what kind of skill he might get. The priest encouraged everyone, saying he hoped each child would receive the skill that fits them best. One by one, the children stepped forward to approach the priest. Suddenly, the large boy from earlier shoved Aruto and told him not to get any ideas. "Someone like you will just get the weakest skill," he sneered, "but I'll be the one to receive the holy sword skill." Aruto didn't argue. He just nodded and said, "Okay, I understand." Then the priest called his name, Aruto Gilbert. Aruto took a deep breath, stepped up the stairs, and walked toward the glowing magic board. The priest told Aruto to place his hand on the magic board and check his status window. Aruto nodded and reached out. As soon as his fingers touched the board, it lit up with a bright glow, so intense that everyone in the chapel had to shield their eyes. When the light faded, words appeared on the glowing screen. Aruto Gilbert development rate, 200%, stat growth, 200%, immune to negative effects, physical strength, 200%, blessed by the world tree. The priest's jaw dropped. He had never seen anything like this before. "Unbelievable," he said. A skill level of air, that's incredibly rare. He quickly congratulated Arudo, and the entire chapel erupted with excitement. People clapped and smiled. Someone shouted, "That's amazing," another said. "Your parents would be so proud," one kid could only say. "Wow." Arudo smiled brightly, proud of the powerful skills he had been given. In the corner, the big guy from earlier clenched his fists and said smugly, "Watch closely, Arudo. Now you'll see what a real skill looks like." Then the priest called out, "Gerudo Picado, please step forward." Gerudo swaggered up to the board, touched it, and waited for his results to appear. The glowing screen shows, Gerudo Picado Skill Woodcutter, Skill Level N. Silence filled the room. Gerudo's face twisted in anger. The room slowly filled with whispers and laughs. Some people muttered that even though his father was the village chief, he had received one of the weakest skills. "Skill Level N? That's just embarrassing," someone said under their breath. The ceremony ended soon after, and everyone started heading home. As Arudo walked through the village, a girl with a bow in her hair caught up with him. Smiling, she asked, "Are you really planning to leave the village and become an adventurer?" The girl's name was Betatric. Arudo smiled and greeted her. He admitted that he wasn't sure yet if he could really become an adventurer. But Betatric reminded him that he had a skill that meant he definitely had a chance to succeed. "If that's true," Arudo said, "then I'll give it a shot." He raised his hand with confidence and mentioned that his skill was called Blessing of the World Tree. Far away in the forest, a small sprout was growing quietly. Maybe that was the World Tree, the same tree tied to Arudo's rare skill. As time passed, Arudo went on to become a famous adventurer. 20 years later, he finally returned to his hometown, the village of Pakat. Now retired, Arudo held his young son in his arms as they walked. He looked at the boy and thought about his old skill. What exactly is the Blessing of the World Tree? He wondered. Was it connected to that tiny sprout from back then? The boy tilted his head. "The World Tree?" he asked. Arudo nodded and replied, "Yes. That's why we must always treat the World Tree with care and respect it." The little boy agreed with a cheerful nod. As they got closer to the forest, Arudo noticed that the old fence must have fallen apart. He figured it was time to build a new one. "Go on ahead," Arudo told his son. "I'll catch up soon." The boy ran off into the woods. Meanwhile, the sprout from 20 years ago had grown a lot. Now it stood about 2 meters tall, strong enough that it wouldn't be crushed under someone's foot anymore. But its trunk was still slim, and recently it had stopped growing. The protagonist couldn't figure out why. The boy ran up to the tree and wondered out loud, could this be the World Tree? To his surprise, the tree answered back, saying, "No, I'm not." His name was Kotoba Sekai, and if he were still human, he would have turned 20 this year. The old wooden fence that had once surrounded him was falling apart. The boy looked at it for a moment, then decided to take it down. Sekai, the tree, asked him, "Why get rid of the only thing I had?" That little fence, along with the slime's visits, were all that had kept him company for 2 decades. But the boy just cleaned up around the tree, clearing away the mess without saying much. Then, after a short pause, the boy turned to the tree and said thank you for the blessing of the World Tree, the skill his father had received. Sekai was confused. Blessing of the World Tree? What does that mean? He wondered. He looked closely at the boy and thought how much he resembled the child who had built the fence all those years ago. Could this really be his son? Just then, a voice shouted in the distance, calling out the boy's name, Juru. A tall guy with a sword slung over his shoulder walked up. It was Bilgu, the son of Gerudo. Bilgu looked annoyed and asked Juru what he was doing there. He pointed at the tree and said it was perfect for sword practice. He planned to use it for training and told Juru to move out of the way. Sekai felt a wave of fear, but Juru stood firm and said confidently that he wouldn't let Bilgu hurt the tree. "This is the World Tree," he said. "Someday, maybe in 100 years, it'll grow into the true Great World Tree." Bilgu burst out laughing and mocked the idea. "This tiny thing? The World Tree?" he sneered. He grabbed Juru by the collar and insulted him, saying that if Juru didn't move, he'd chop him down first. Bilgu raised his sword, but Juru quickly dodged to the side. He grabbed a stick from the ground and begged Bilgu to stop. He didn't want to fight. Bilgu attacked again, but this time, Juru blocked the sword with his stick. The impact knocked the sword out of Bilgu's hands and it stuck into the dirt. Frustrated, Bilgu lunged at Juru with his fists, shouting at him not to act so tough. Juru had no choice but to keep defending himself with the stick. Suddenly, a firm voice called out, "That's enough." It was Arudo, walking toward them. Bilgu quickly straightened up and greeted him politely. But Arudo was serious. He told Bilgu not to harm the tree and reminded him to treat nature with respect. He warned that messing with the world tree could bring the anger of Mother Nature. Bilgu apologized and said he was heading home. Then Arudo turned to Juru. After giving him a sharp look, he gently patted him on the head. "You remembered the techniques I taught you," he said with a proud smile. Watching the two walk away together, Sekai, the tree, felt warmth in his heart. They even built him a new fence. A father and son, what a pair, he thought. Sekai silently sent his blessing to Juru, wishing him a life full of happiness. Then he paused, reflecting. Wasn't I called the World Tree? Once Juru left, things went back to the peaceful, quiet Sekai had known for years. The tree had been growing, but lately, its progress seemed to slow down again. Sekai wondered if he'd ever become a mighty, towering tree, or if he'd just end up being some average, forgettable one. Just then, a massive slime emerged from the bushes. Sekai lit up with joy. Could it really be the same slime from before? He wondered. The giant slime reached out its arms and started pouring water onto Sekai from both sides. Sekai noticed how much bigger the slime had become. It must have brought a lot more water this time. He felt incredibly thankful. Then, to his surprise, he spotted a bunch of tiny slimes surrounding him. Each one took turns spraying water onto the tree, making sure it was fully soaked from every direction. Even though Sekai had already been watered, they just kept going. With so much water, Sekai knew he'd be good for a while. He sent waves of gratitude and warm thoughts to the entire slime family. Time passed, and the tree continued to grow. It was now about 3 meters tall. But before long, Sekai began to worry again. The growth had slowed once more. Maybe he wasn't getting enough nutrients this time. Then, out of the forest, a dark, intimidating wolf appeared. It growled deeply and stalked towards Sekai. The tree panicked, silently telling the wolf, "Hey, I'm not food." The wolf sniffed around, turned around, and to Sekai's horror squatted right at the base of the tree. Sekai begged it to stop, but the only reply was a deafening roar that echoed through the woods, loud enough to send the birds flying out of the trees. The wolf covered up its droppings in the soil, and not long after, tiny new leaves began sprouting from the tree's branches. Sekai felt a spark of excitement. He was growing again, and it was all thanks to the nutrients in that magical wolf poop. Grateful, Sekai quietly thanked the wolf and sent a wave of positive energy toward him. He hoped the wolf would live a good, happy life. Time went by. Day turned to night and night back to day. One evening, the same wolf returned, but this time he wasn't alone. He had become the leader of a whole pack. The wolf approached and spoke, surprising Sekai. He apologized for what he had done before, admitting that it had been rude and disrespectful. Sekai was shocked that the wolf could talk now. He must have evolved, Sekai thought. He's much smarter than before. But Sekai told him not to worry. That incident actually helped him grow, so there were no hard feelings. Still, the wolf wanted to make things right. As a gift, he and his pack brought the severed heads of several monsters. The wolf explained that these would make great fertilizer, much better than what he'd given last time. The other wolves respectfully asked the tree to accept this offering as an apology. Sekai thanked them all sincerely. Dead monsters were full of rich nutrients, just what he needed to grow stronger. Looking at the pile, Sekai felt hopeful. Maybe now he could reach even greater heights. The wolves began visiting regularly, bringing food to the tree. With their help, Sekai grew stronger and taller over time. Eventually, a spider made its home in his branches. By then, Sekai had reached a height of about 7 meters, a full-grown tree. One day, 2 lumberjacks appeared, led by an older man. The elderly man looked up at the tall tree and said, "This one's big enough now." Sekai silently agreed. It was hard to believe he had once been just a tiny sprout. As he looked at their clothes, Sekai guessed they were from the same village as the kind boy he remembered. He wondered what they needed. Maybe he could help somehow. But then the old man gave a sharp command. "All right, chop it down." Sekai froze. Why? What's happening? He thought in confusion. A spider slowly lowered itself from the branches on a thin thread of web, as if sensing trouble. The old man let out a laugh as the woodcutters prepared their axes. Sekai was filled with fear and confusion. Why are they doing this? What did I do wrong? Just as the first axe was raised, a blur of movement burst from the forest. The wolves leapt out and positioned themselves in front of the tree, ready to fight. Their teeth were bared, and their growls made the woodcutters back away quickly.